Firstly, I'd like to welcome everyone for coming tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd also like to thank our guest speakers, some who have come quite a long way to join us. Before I introduce them, I'd like to start by a little quote from Apple, which I think is very appropriate. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And I think that a lot of us in this room are a little crazy. Because we think we can change the world. I'm sure that the room is full of people who've been touched by cancer, whether it's yourselves, a friend or a relative, and it affects so many people's lives around you. And anything we can do to prevent that is a worthwhile cause. I believe it's our responsibility as a manufacturer to make products that are safe for people to use. But also that consumers have the right to make an informed choice. And tonight is all about educating people to make an informed choice, and ultimately that's what changes the industry for the better. And because education is such an important part of that process, our guest speakers here tonight are key to that, and part of us learning about how we can prevent cancer. I'm now delighted to introduce our first speaker, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Margot. I'm delighted to be back here to contribute to what I now think is an annual event run by the Organic Pharmacy. What I'd like to talk to you about tonight is pesticides and cancer, and how I feel that, all consumers are, in fact, at risk. As Margot said, I head up ChemTrust, the Chemicals, Health and Environment Monitoring Trust, and as she also said, we do look at industrial chemicals and pesticides and how, by them being incorporated into the food that we eat and the consumer products that we use, how they impact on both human and wildlife health. And certainly, cancer is coming more and more to the fore in that. Having talked a lot at these previous events about chemicals in consumer products, I thought I'd talk about chemicals in food, and they tend to be pesticides. And it was just a couple of years ago that the Ecology Trust came to me at ChemTrust, and we said, can you do a report for us? And so we ended up writing a review of the role of pesticides playing cancers. And we found that, yes, the three groups that are most at risk are children, farmers, and pesticide users. However, what I'm going to say today is I think that, we are all unwitting users of pesticides. I think there's no doubt about it that pesticides are not only in the food that we eat through application by the farmer, but they now fundamentally contaminate all watercourses. I think there's one certain pesticide called atrazine that it is thought now contaminates every potable water source in the whole of Europe. And they're also in the air that we breathe. They're being sprayed all over, and the wind comes along and one finds that we're inhaling them. I think it's not only the individual pesticides to which you may be exposed, that arguably at a very, very low level they might be safe. But you're not. You're exposed to many, many pesticides. And also you're exposed to the hormone-disrupting chemicals that are in your cosmetics, that are in your soft plastics, that are in your hard plastics, that are in the brominated flame retardants that you're exposed to. And I think this cocktail of exposure is now what more and more scientists are becoming worried about. So what is the research telling us? Well, when we produced our report, I do think that the most worrying thing that we came out with was that it is the in utero exposure of the pregnant mother that leads to the highest risk of cancer in children. And it's definitely leukemia that seems to be the one that is going up in children. So I think what the conclusion that ChemTrust has come to, and I think probably a lot of you here will also come to, is that, what we need is to focus on cancer prevention. And I feel, the UK government, even though we've now devolved our authority to Europe, The UK government should be a strong voice, and Europe should be thinking about phasing out those pesticides that are known hormone disruptors that are implicated in cancer, and they should be replaced with safer alternatives.
So what I want to do today is to focus on cosmetics, which is why we're here at the Organic Pharmacy, and breast cancer. The fact is that breast cancer incidence continues to rise worldwide. Risk factors have been identified, but the causes remain unknown. What we do know is that there are some risk factors, and the main risk factor is lifetime exposure to estrogen. So the question is, what are the implications if you have exposure from the environment of a whole range of different estrogen-mimiccing chemicals which can get into a cell and fool it to think it's seen estrogen? There are known effects now in aquatic wildlife from these chemicals, which a previous speaker alluded to, and we now know that many of these can enter the human breast. So what are the implications? Well, where do these things come from? The first and obvious source of such estrogens, of course, are the pharmacological estrogens in the form of the contraceptive pill or hormone replacement therapy, but we also come up with a lot in diet. Phytoestrogens are contained in plant material, things like soy, which have estrogenic chemicals in them. There are persistent organochlorine pollutants that were again alluded to in the last talk, at least in the sense of pesticides and herbicides, which accumulate in animal fat, as do the polychlorinated biphenyls, which come up through the food chain from use in the electrical industry, and dioxins. These all accumulate in animal fat. But in addition to this, we also have personal care products, which also now contain a very large number of estrogen-mimicking chemicals. In fact, I joked to someone recently, said if we have too many more of them, I'm not going to get them all on one page for a review anymore. I started off with one or two. I guess I should always be known for the parabens, which are added as preservatives to cosmetics and which are not used within this environment, and triclosan, which is also used as a deodorant in products. The evidence that these things can influence human health. And I say to you up front that the only proven evidence we have at the moment is that women who were prescribed diethylstilbestrol, which is a very potent estradiol during pregnancy in the 1970s, they were prescribed this actually in order to stop miscarriage, and it was removed fairly quickly. It's now known that those women have an increased incidence of breast cancer. And many years on, as you can see, the next study has shown that indeed their daughters have breast cancer incidence at an increased rate. Those are proven studies. But that's the only proven study. Beyond that, we don't have any evidence to link any of these chemicals specifically to breast cancer at the moment. What we do have are a variety of links now between applying things to the skin and seeing some sort of alteration to reproduction. There is an example now documented in 2008 of a little 3-year-old girl with Felice, that means full-blown menstruation at the age of 3, from exposure to mum's shampoo. She was apparently a thumb sucker, so was my daughter. And she used to sit on mum's knee, twiddle mum's hair, suck her thumb, and that was enough to bring on menstruation. Again, that's documented in the clinical literature. And she went away, was asked not to do that anymore, to change her shampoo, I think the mother was asked. Maybe she should have been asked to use something from the Organic Pharmacy, and the problems went away. So I proposed the hypothesis in 2001, this was my original paper, and I've written many others since, that cosmetics might be providing a special scenario of continuous exposure for the human breast. So like in the wildlife, you have them bathed in this soup of chemicals in the water in which they're living, that the breast is being bathed by chemicals that you leave on the breast and around the breast, and which get absorbed just little by little into the breast. So the parabens are the alkyl esters of para-hydroxybenzoic acid, and they're used as preservatives in a wide range of cosmetics, foods and pharmaceuticals. There are 5 commonly used, which I've put the structures down here, and they all possess estrogenic activity. Well, we've done studies, and so have other people published studies showing that beyond shadow of a doubt. What is true is that they bind to the estrogen receptor, but they bind more weakly than the normal female hormone estradiol. There's some chemistry in it, because as the alkyl chain gets bigger, as I put this arrow, they get more potent in terms of their binding to estrogen receptor. But what it means is that you have to put more of them there to bind to the receptor before they will have an effect compared to the normal physiological hormone. We measured parabens in human breast tissue in 2004 and published a very pioneering study using 20 human breast tissue samples where we found an average of 20.6 nanograms per gram of tissue there. That was the first study where it was ever shown that parabens could get into the human body. So we went on in 2012, and in January this year we published a second study, this time much bigger, where this was in collaboration with the Manchester Breast Group, where we had 160 human breast tissue samples. What we did was to take from 40 patients with primary breast cancer. We went for primary breast cancer because that was the closest time at which we could get to the point at which the symptoms had appeared. But because they were primary breast cancers, the tissue was very small and was all needed for diagnosis. So ethically we couldn't use it to look at concentrations in the tumour. What we did was to look at the non-affected tissue in 4 serial locations across the breast, on the basis that if things were coming from the underarm, we might see a gradient across the breast. And in these samples, we measured 1 or more paraben in 158 out of 160 of the samples, and in 96 of them, that's 60%, we found all 5 parabens. We haven't any evidence that any specific chemical links to breast cancer. What we have are measurements of lots of chemicals in the human breast. We still have a data gap about what chemicals are in a single human breast. Most of them are studies in different parts of the world, different populations with one chemical or another. We still need to know what's in a single human breast. So I end on a more positive note, because for me this whole issue of cosmetics is easier to deal with than diet. Because diet, we all have to eat all these things, and we can't avoid, I think, as Elizabeth was saying, we can do all sorts of things to help, but we can't avoid things completely. But with the cosmetics, women have a greater choice. Because if estrogenic chemicals of cosmetics, or indeed other properties of chemicals in cosmetics, can play any role in breast cancer development, then prevention might become possible, either through reducing usage or moving to reformulation of products. And thank you to the Organic Pharmacy for at least trying to do that for us.
Thank you for inspiring us.
I start, my talk deals with antioxidants in the treatment prevention of breast cancer. It's a big word. First, warmest regards from the original FX Mind More at Lake Worth, where I work. And let's go directly into the subject. Free radicals, you heard it now, it's not just another terrorist group. Antioxidants is not just another political fraction. System in war condition, you heard it. Our system is permanently in war condition, but it's no PR for the next Star Wars movie. The conclusion, be surprised. First, a little bit of chemistry and biochemistry. The free radical, what is it? I say it with the words of a Partners Institute. So you see here, this is a normal atom, it's quite balanced, it has 2 electrons, they are paired, and here you see the single, there's a free radical, it has only 1 electron, it's looking for a partner, very desperate, and for that it takes very radical measures. Here are the most important and the best researched antioxidants: selenium, zinc, coenzyme Q10, vitamin A, C, E, the carotenes, glutathione, and also very important group, flavonoids from plants, green tea extract, resveratrol from the red grape, red wine, polyphenols, anthocyanidins, basically all the colors of fruits and vegetables you should consume. But believe me, you cannot consume that much fruits and vegetables a day that you have sufficient antioxidants. It's very interesting, there are 700 substances, most of them being antioxidants, and there is one interesting target. It's nuclear factor kappa B. There are more than, this nuclear factor kappa B is a signaling factor for tumor genesis, and there are more than 700 inhibitors on this activation pathway, many of them being antioxidants. Nucleus factor kappa B regulates the expression of genes involved in, remember the last slide, transformation, survival, proliferation, invasion, and angiogenesis is the building of new blood vessels, and metastasis of tumor cells. It's quite interesting. what makes nucleus factor kappa B that special? Yeah? It was identified in tissues of most cancer patients, including breast cancer, and because of the relevance of the signaling, this pathway has been proven to be an attractive target for development of new therapeutics. Now, last slide again. You see here the red substances like oxidative stress, heavy metals, hormones, cytokines, endotoxins, chemic drugs, bacteria, carcinogens, sunlight, tobacco, viruses. They are all activating nucleus factor kappa B. And you see on the other side substances from Mother Nature like allicin from garlic, like lutein, like many of these antioxidants which I showed you, which is blocking the activation of this pathway, which is promoting the tumor cell progression. My talk here, the basis of my talk is this research from Gupta, Kim, Prasad, Agarwal. It was published online in August 2010 in Cancer Metastasis Review. They researched these substances and the effect on cell lines. And let's go a little bit into the details. Examples. Curcumin of the turmeric has a potential to sensitize human colorectal cancer cells to a chemotherapeutic, yeah? So stop the growth. Resveratrol from the grapes is inducing apoptosis. You remember it? Cell death. Very good also, it worked in pancreatic carcinoma cells. Then breast cancer, resveratrol suppressed the nucleus factor kappa B activation and cell proliferation. Here, green tea extract, found in green tea, it's epigallocatechin. It has suppressed malignant transformation in mouse epidermal cell lines, again blocking nucleus factor kappa B. Ginger, tropical ginger compound, yeah? Again, here decreased cell viability in breast carcinoma cells. And here also sanguinaria from Sanguina canadiensis is killing human breast carcinoma cells, induces apoptosis. How do we proceed? Basically, we want to identify, if you come to us, how much oxidative stress do you have in your system. That means we do first, it's a finger prick. We take some blood. We have a photometric method in measuring free radicals. Here we can already tell what is your antioxidative capacity, how much reserve capacity do you have still left, fighting cancer, viruses, bacteria. And then we realize we might check further for vitamins, antioxidants, or nitrostress, or even checking deeper the liver function. Because nowadays we have only 3 enzymes which are checked in the NHS. Transaminases, one of them is high, gamma GT. If you drink too much alcohol, that's all. We are able to send your probes in a very special laboratory which checks genetically your capacity of liver detoxification. Most of the detoxification of toxins is happening in the liver in different stages. The therapy is accordingly. Of course, the diet, probiotic, organic, rich, antioxidants. You must do some intestinal refurbishment. You saw the picture of mucosal cell death. So oxidative stress can kill your mucosal cells. You're not able to absorb vitamins, micronutrients, antioxidants. And so also the flora must be intact. Oxidative stress, if we find very high parameters in our tests, we give you high-dose vitamin C infusion, we give you high-dose selenium, zinc, and the antioxidants in the vein. And of course, you must balance mentally because it's contributing all over to the stress. What is the biggest handicap in the usage of these new researched substances? There's a resistance to chemoprevention emerging. Of course, nobody wants to take a lot of pills, nobody wants to take chemicals. Also, the origins of antioxidants are a little bit doubted, where they come from. And thus, a better understanding of the pathways involved in tumor progression is necessary. Conclusion, you may have guessed it. I'm not telling you a lot of new things. Improve your nutrition. Reduce toxicity however you can. Yeah? Improve your antioxidative capacity. So basically, to be a little bit safer with all these items we heard, you can't take an oxidant a day keeps the doctor away. Yeah? You can't take this for granted. I sign it to you. Yeah? Many other doctors will kill me for that, but I sign this.
Now, the title of my talk is Why Did I Form the Cancer Prevention and Education Society, which is a registered charity here in the United Kingdom. If you ask my family, they'd say it's because I went mad. But I was heartened that you said a bit of madness is good, because I certainly believe that myself. Well, as a young man, I got my degree in chemistry from Imperial College just around the corner. And at that time, I really believed that the world needed more science and technology to cure all our problems. And I worked in medical biotechnology in the early 80s. And I was lucky that I got to look after a drug called alpha interferon, which is used in the treatment of hepatitis and certain cancers. But already in 1986, an article appeared in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very prestigious clinical journal, saying that in their consideration, the authors, that modern approaches to cancer had been a dismal failure, considering all the money that had been thrown at it. And then significantly, about 10 years later, The Ecologist magazine, a completely different kind of magazine, they published one issue devoted to cancer, in which they highlighted quite clearly that the environment was a very, very important cause of cancer. When I started reading the various articles, and for example, the first missionaries that went into Africa and doctors, they would examine tens of thousands of black African women, not see a single case of breast cancer. Right? And now we know in the West now, 1 in 7 women will get breast cancer. So I was kind of interested, why are all these things going on? Some people say that cancer is a disease of aging, okay? So why, as Elizabeth pointed out, why is children's cancers rising at a rate of 1% per annum, which is what they're rising at? So I started reading, I read more and more scientific literature, and I realized that there was a lot of evidence out there, a lot of very strong, good science showing that we had a problem. And I couldn't understand why the medical establishment, who surely, because we tend to trust, well I did certainly as a young man, the authorities that are there to look after us, why weren't they seeing the same data that I was looking at, and people like Elizabeth and Philip were looking at, and making chemicals a public health issue? Why weren't they doing it? I later discovered that a lot of the data, it's non-human data, because you can't do clinical trials on chemicals, is confined to specialist journals. So a lot of this stuff is not in your typical clinical journal that you read. And the other thing that I discovered that was important, because you always hear about genes and the importance of genetics, is the predominant cause of cancer is environmental, it's not genetic. There was a landmark study, again in the New England Journal of Medicine, which showed 45,000 twin pairs, and they showed the environment is more important than genes. So that was very significant. And then I discovered that we've got all these tens of thousands of chemicals in use today, right? But they're not regulated. And more importantly, not only are they not properly regulated, they're not evaluated by authorities. So nobody's looking at company data. Now, whatever you think of the pharmaceutical industry, an industry in which I work, that industry is highly regulated. But most of the chemicals in use aren't properly regulated, so that came as a big shock to me. And as a chemist, it was self-evident to me that chemicals which are toxic, that bioaccumulate, right, might have an effect on human health. And those skeptical scientists that say, oh no, we need more evidence, we need more data, I could imagine in the old days saying, oh, we need randomized studies to test whether parachutes work or not, right? Which branch would you have been in, I asked. Now, what do we know? We know that reducing exposure to tobacco and smoking has been a very effective public health program. I haven't shown the slide, but you can see the data of rates of lung cancer coming down. So the question that is begged is, can we do the same for chemicals? Should chemicals be on the public health agenda in the United Kingdom, right? On the cancer agenda? If you look at the report, the chemicals aren't mentioned at all, apart from tobacco. So I find that quite shocking. So because of this failure of government agencies to act on our behalf, informed consumer choice is extremely important, right? So I very much endorse progressive companies like the Organic Pharmacy trying to do the right thing when there has been failure at the sort of legislative level. Our charity, which I formed in 2001, our primary target audience isn't the lay community, it's technical audiences. So we work with doctors, with scientists, with regulators, with policymakers, with MPs. We probably have quite similar objectives, I don't know entirely to ChemTrust, but quite similar. To get them to put chemicals on the agenda, not only for cancer but for other illnesses as well. So what's my advice, just to wrap it all up? I would say carry on being discerning consumers, read the product labels carefully. I know even I as a chemist it's quite confusing, right? But you know what to look for if you see things like parabens or phthalates or things, you know, that should warn you a bit. The other issue too is that we've heard this mentioned, but things like perfumes and flavourings include whole classes of molecules, right, which aren't actually labelled, so you have to be a bit careful about that. I think the fact that our government agencies could be doing far more, I really do believe in the fact that consumers as individuals can do something, but we also need to act individually and collectively. So you should be asking your MP, why aren't chemicals on the cancer agenda? Why aren't they there? If you get feedback saying there's no evidence, putting it politely, that's BS. There's tons of evidence. It's not often non-human because you can't do clinical trials with chemicals for ethical reasons, but there's tons of evidence of the kind that Philippa produces. We have archives of it. If anybody wants data that they can go back to their MP, we have it. Contact me. We'll give it to you. We need you. We need your support and interest, and you know, I'm really pleased that we were asked here tonight to tell you about our charity. That's all I can say, but thank you very much.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming. I hope you found this evening useful and that you'll share it with the people that you know. And again, a huge thank you to our speakers for speaking tonight. And if anyone needs any information, it will be on our website, but you can also contact everyone individually should you wish to. So all the details will be going up soon. Thank you. Thank you for coming.